Hello everybody, my name is Danielle Fopp and I will be taking you through today's lecture on Introduction to the Project Appraisal Process. When do we undertake project appraisals? There are many phases to a construction project, but a project appraisal is part of the pre-investment studies phase. A project appraisal is completed at the beginning of a project before any large sums of money or other forms of investment are incurred. And we can see on the screen we have idea development, concept development, business development, and project execution. The project appraisal is completed as part of the business development phase prior to project execution. This topic will provide you with a greater understanding of when we conduct project appraisals in construction. So as we've seen, a project's life cycle may be split into separate phases, and what characterises these different phases may be more or less clearly defined. And it's important for you to note that these phases may go by different names depending on what textbook or resource you are referring to. In this course, we are keeping the phases fairly high level because we know that project appraisal happens early on in the front end phase of the project. However, you may see terms such as planning phase, implementation phase, operational, termination, identification, concept design, and detailed design. And it's okay if you are a little unclear about where these phases happen because some of the phases do overlap. Now in this diagram on the screen, we have used a simplified cycle with three phases: the front end phase, the implementation phase, and the operational phase. And in this project, we are really looking at the front end phase of the project. Now we can see from this diagram that our possibility to influence the project is highest up front in this front end phase. This is where we complete the project appraisal. And we know that following the project appraisal, or after this front end phase, the cost of major amendments in the project increases rapidly as time approaches the detailed planning and project execution. So now we're going to dive straight into that front end phase and really unpack it so we better understand where the project appraisal sits in the project life cycle. Now we understand that the idea development occurs very early on. That's the first thing that usually happens, and that will generally be given to you by the client. Then there are pre-feasibility studies and support studies, and these might include environmental, heritage, location studies. From this, we will be able to start defining any problems that we foresee with the project and we'll be able to long list. We then move into the feasibility studies, and these might include commercial, technical, financial, socio-economic, legal, and so on. From this, we can consult and shortlist any idea developments which might not be suitable for the project. So within the one idea development, you might have 3 or 4 variations of this, and at this point in the project, we can now start to narrow it down. We then have the final choice of location and site selection based on these initial assessments, and this is the stage where we now do the appraisal report. Following this, we do project financing, review and refine any studies as required before moving into project execution. Now we know that the project matures as it moves through these phases. However, this whole phase or these whole steps are in the front end phase of the project timeline. So let's now take a look at idea development, which is also commonly called scheme or project concept phase, which is the first phase in your construction project. The idea development phase consists of brainstorming and idea generation activities to give the project a more rounded shape. We will be discussing things like objectives. What are we looking for from the project? What are we looking to get out of the project? And the main purpose of this phase is to flesh out selected business ideas or project ideas. Here there may be many more project ideas and identification of investment opportunities than will actually be taken through to completion. But it's the starting point in a series of investment-related activities. It's the main instrument used to quantify the parameters of the project, the information and data required to develop the project idea, and what further steps are required to take it to a proposal. Now, following the idea development and opportunity studies phase, we should have a project brief or multiple project briefs. And the project brief should set out the rationale for the project in a clear and concise manner so that the reader can understand why the project is being proposed, what objectives it is seeking to achieve, and what other options have been considered with reference to any company or project policy requirements. Now we're going to move on to the concept development phase, and this includes pre-feasibility studies, support studies, defining any problems, and reducing the number of project options or variables associated with the project. So the concept development phase of the project generally consists of two major studies, a pre-feasibility study and a feasibility study. The pre-feasibility study can be seen as a rougher version of the feasibility study. In this phase, we want to discard any unattractive ideas and choose the best among many. The term feasibility study is often misunderstood and often misused. Frequently, an outline of the project and technology to be used is called a feasibility study, but it is rather a technical study or a support study. If it does not cover multiple feasibility aspects of the project, as required for an unbiased project appraisal, it is not a feasibility study. Both the pre-feasibility and feasibility study must be related to the local environment. It should also be noted that a feasibility study should only be carried out if the necessary financing facilities can be identified with a fair degree of accuracy. There would be little sense in completing a feasibility study without the reliable assurance that, in the event of a positive study output, funds could be made available for the project. For that reason, possible project financing must be considered early in the feasibility study stage, as financing conditions have a direct effect on total costs and thus on the financial feasibility of the project. A feasibility study should also provide all data necessary for an investment decision. Now let's take a closer look at both of these. Now, during a pre-feasibility study phase, the project idea must be elaborated on to obtain more detailed information. However, the formulation of a full feasibility study that enables a definite decision to be made on the project is a costly and time-consuming task. Therefore, before a company assigns larger sums and time for the feasibility study, a further assessment of the available project ideas must be made during the pre-feasibility study. The principal objectives of this phase are to determine whether all possible project alternatives have been examined and to identify critical project aspects, if the project idea is feasible enough to take to the next phase, to review the alternatives, elaborate on project ideas, and examine all possible project ideas available. In some consulting firms, the feasibility studies will be completed alongside the support studies because they are so closely linked. Support studies cover specific aspects of a project which may be required, for example, approval. These support studies are particularly relevant for large-scale investment projects. Examples of such studies include market studies of the product to be manufactured, including demand projections, raw material or factory supply studies, which may cover both current and projected availability of raw materials which are required for the project, location studies, and this is particularly relevant for potential projects where the transport costs may constitute a major determining factor. In this phase, environmental impact assessments are also completed. An environmental impact assessment is an ongoing support study which will evolve as the project progresses. They cover environmental conditions in the area surrounding the potential site, alternative sites, and impact analysis of any predicted potential detrimental environmental impacts of the proposed project. In a feasibility study, the commercial, technical, financial prerequisites for a project will be defined and examined. And this is conducted on the basis of alternative solutions which have already been reviewed in the pre-feasibility phase. The result of this phase of the project is a narrowed down list of project options and a better defined project whose background conditions and aims have been clearly defined in terms of the project objectives. The financial part of a feasibility study covers the broad scope of the investment, including approximate sales reviews and return on capital invested. Following this phase, the project team will consult the feasibility studies and create a short list of projects. From this, the final choice of project and site selection will be finalised. So as we've gone through the project phases to this point, we've narrowed it down from say 5 to 6 options. Then the pre-feasibility might knock out a couple, so now we're down to 3 options. And following the feasibility study, we have 1 option. Following this phase, we will now have a more concrete idea of the project and have confirmed site selection or route selection. The project brief should also be reviewed at this stage and updated to reflect the history of the project and provide further details and objectives where possible. So as we have seen in each of the project stages thus far, they have helped us to refine and narrow down the project idea. And now that we have consulted the shortlist, we have a final location, site, route selected, and a project option which we are happy and confident to take with us to the next stage. Now it's worth noting that in some construction projects, the client will come to you with the option and the project idea that they are confident and happy with, and so you will not be involved in these stages. Now in the business development phase, there are usually 2 stages, a validation stage and a preparation phase. As we saw in the last slide, the most feasible idea has been selected, and we need to validate this with detailed analysis and appraisal of both economic and non-economic project factors. When the feasibility stage is complete, the various parties involved in the project will carry out their own appraisal of the investment project in accordance with their individual objectives, success factors, and evaluation of expected risks, costs, and gains. Large construction firms and consulting firms have their own formalised project appraisal procedures and will prepare a project appraisal report. The project appraisal builds on the work completed during the feasibility studies. The better quality of the feasibility study, the easier it will be to complete the project appraisal. It's also worth noting that the project appraisal can be considered the final pre-investment phase and validate the final investment and financing decisions to be taken by the client. The appraisal report is also key in the preparation stage of the project and will help frame the next phase. Now in the validation stage, the appraisal involves a careful checking of the basic data, assumptions, and methodology used in the project preparation. It also involves an in-depth review of the work plan, cost estimates, proposed financing, an assessment of the project's organisational and management aspects, and finally, the viability of the project. And in this course, we will work through what is involved in these appraisals. And as you can see on screen, this is the validation of work done to date. And then we have the preparation phase. And the appraisal report forms both part of the validation and preparation. So the appraisal report looks both backwards at what has been done and looks forward on what needs to be done. And that brings us to the final phase that we will be looking at in project appraisal, which is the project execution. And this is expanded on in greater detail in your other courses. Hi everyone, welcome to